After Sony's complete and utter domination of the camera market for the summer season, Canon and Nikon strike back, eliminating Fuji and Panasonic from the top 10. But while weakened, Sony still holds on. What's the state of the camera empire? Stick around after this short break for all the details. But first, subscribe to this channel for a chance to win a Canon EOS R5. I'll be giving one away to one lucky subscriber once this channel reaches 100,000 subscribers. Anyone above the age of 18 with a valid mailing address is eligible. Additional terms and conditions are linked in the description down below. We've got the September camera sales data from Yodobashi, Japan's fourth largest camera retailer with 23 stores. And while Yodobashi doesn't give us a glimpse into worldwide sales, Yodobashi releases their sales data every 2 weeks, giving us something to talk about on a lazy Sunday morning, or a lazy Sunday evening, depending on where you are. In the number one spot, we have a Sony. Take a wild guess. Yeah, it's not hard to guess. In the number one spot, we have the Sony a7 IV. Now, since this camera was released back in December of 2021, it's been on a tear. It's been in the number one spot more times than I can count. In fact, it's been in the top 3 every single week, every single month that Yodobashi's reported their sales data out of Japan. And that's just staggering. To hold that number one spot for so long. And the way Yodobashi reports their sales data, they report it by SKU. So not only do we have it in the number one spot, further cementing their position as the dominant camera, the a7 IV, we also have it in 5th place. And of course, that's the body in 1st place. And then of course, we have it as kit form in 5th place. So yeah, complete and utter domination by Sony. But that's where the Sony domination ends. The top 5? Well, it's dominated by Canon and Nikon. They strike back in the number 2 spot. We have, can you guess, Canon, Nikon? Can you guess which one? I know what Nikon customers are thinking. They're betting it's the Nikon Z8, and well, you'd be right. The Nikon Z8 returns to the top 10 in the number 2 spot, doing very, very well. The camera was announced back on May the 10th and started shipping on May the 25th, and the camera's doing very, very well. I like the Nikon Z8, and if I was looking at buying a camera today and I didn't have any lenses, then, you know, the Nikon Z8 would be my camera of choice. It just looks incredible in terms of stills and video capabilities. And in the number 3 spot, it's not a Nikon, but it's a Canon, and it's the Canon EOS R6 Mark II. And it's paired with the 24-105 f4 L-series weather-sealed lens, not the other one, the 24-105 with a variable aperture and not weather-sealed. And I get it, the 24-105 f4 is terrific. It is a bit more expensive than the one that isn't weather sealed, but if you're going to be buying a camera like the R6, which is weather sealed, I don't know if you're going to be saving all that much money when you realize, you know, your system isn't weather sealed anymore. You can have the body weather sealed, but as soon as you put on a lens that isn't weather sealed, well, you lose all the benefits. And in 4th place, we have another Canon. It's the Canon EOS R50 double lens zoom kit. I like this camera. Body alone, it sells for $679. And in terms of video and stills, it's got a lot of really good capabilities. And this camera is one of the first Canon cameras to actually borrow from, well, smartphones, providing computational capabilities in terms of photo processing. It's a pretty good camera. Its stills rate is pretty good. The ISO range is pretty good. I do like the R50. And video, 6K oversampled 4K. And in 6th place, we have the Sony a7 R5, a camera that was announced back in late October 2022, and for all intents purposes has been doing quite well ever since. Not as well as the Sony a7 IV, but it's been showing up in the top 10, in the top 7 most weeks, and it's a good solid camera, 10 frames per second. One thing I really like about this camera, excluding the video capabilities, yes, it can do 8K, 24 and 25 frames per second, although it does have a crop. It has CF Express Type A cards. That's a bit of a downer, but as Gen 4 is approved, what Sony will have in the a7 R5 very shortly, or all cameras that shoot with CF Express Type A cards, is you're going to have CF Express Type B card, or CF Express Type B card speeds, which is really impressive. Exact same speeds as what we see today with Gen 3 CF Express Type B. But the one thing that really gets me about the Sony a7 R5 is pixel shift. It's pretty impressive. It's not the resolution that you get, it's that it works so well with moving subjects. There is no other camera that does pixel shift as well as the Sony a7 R5, and many other cameras have come out with pixel shift, many before the Sony a7 R5, but the Sony a7 R5 is, what I would consider the benchmark now for pixel shift. And the Canon EOS R5, which recently got it in a firmware update, and again, thank you Canon for doing that. We've got this capability. Unfortunately though, at this point in this incarnation, it doesn't support, well, the ability to shoot moving subjects without creating that, blurriness, and well, it's just useless. Any sort of movement, whether it's trees, leaves, grass, anything, let alone cars or people, and your shot's useless. So product in food photography, it works out very well. In 8th place, we have the Nikon Z50 double lens zoom kit, and followed in 9th place, we have another Nikon camera. Both of these are affordable entry-level cameras. We have the Nikon ZFC with a 16 to 50 millimeter lens. So Nikon is doing quite well here. We've seen Nikon in the top 10 with 3 cameras. We have Canon with 3 cameras in the top 10, which means that Sony is limited to 4, and we've only talked about 3 of them. And in 10th place, we do have a Sony. It's the recently announced. It was announced back in July, and that's a Sony a6700. So 4 Sonys in the top 10, not dominating. They hold 10th place, they hold the middle of the road, and they hold 1st place with the Sony a7 IV. The Sony a7 IV just doing very, very well. Nikon strikes back, taking that number 2 spot. Number 2 spot is a very good place to be. It shows that you're able to produce a lot of cameras, be able to move a lot of cameras, and get them in the hands of consumers. And of course, Canon isn't doing too badly either. They're showing up with 3 cameras in the top 10. What we saw over the summer season is some weeks we would see Canon completely shut out of the marketplace with maybe 1 camera in the number 9th spot or 10th spot, or completely shut out altogether. Now we are waiting for a refresh of some Canon cameras. The Canon EOS R5 Mark II replacing the Canon EOS R5, and that is about to happen pretty soon, sometime I would say within the next 6 months. We could have an announcement on the heels of CP+, along with some lenses. We're also expecting a refresh of the 1DX Mark III with a mirrorless version of that camera, the Canon EOS R1, which promises to be the master of everything. So those 2 highly anticipated cameras, a whole bunch of lenses, and of course Canon customers are also asking, are we going to see a, well, replacement of the Canon EOS RP to hold on to that position, because we still have that R9 position, and having an entry-level, affordable, full-frame camera makes a lot of sense. That RP was priced right around, well, $999. That's a regular retail price, but quite often it would go on sale. So having a replacement of that camera that sells somewhere around $999 or even $1,099, several $100 less than the Canon EOS R8, that would get a lot of interest. That would be it would sell very, very well, just like the RP does. So that's, all right, enough rambling on. You've seen how the camera market performed in the first 2 weeks of September. If you want to see how the camera market performs in the second 2 weeks of September, what happens with Sony, Nikon, Canon, Panasonic, Fujifilm, OM1, and others, maybe Alice camera, well then stick around in 2 weeks. In 2 weeks to this day, because like clockwork, we get the sales data released from Yodobashi on a 2-week basis. So I'm really curious to see what happens. Sony and Nikon are doing quite well. In fact, Nikon for the first half of this year didn't perform very well. Very rarely did we see a camera of theirs in the top 10. So it's good to see Nikon doing well. And I think the Nikon Z8 and Nikon Z9 has really attracted attention. And of course, the Nikon ZF, it was just announced. That hasn't started shipping yet. So we should see that show up in the top 10 in the coming weeks. Maybe next month. Maybe in October, we'll see the Nikon ZF show up in the top 10. But where will it be? Where will the Sony a7 IV or the you know what? Here's one thing you can help me understand. The Sony a7 IV has been selling very, very well. When are we going to see the Sony a7 IV drop from the top 3 or even the top 10? Give me your predictions in the comment section down below. And if you want to stay up to date on all the latest camera gear news and rumors, specifically sales data like this, which I publish every 2 weeks, well then go ahead and subscribe, but make sure you also choose all notifications. And for all the minor news stories, all that news that isn't quite big enough to have its own separate video, pricing information, deals like that, for example, $300 off the Canon EOS R5 and R3, well then go ahead and follow me on X, formerly known as Twitter. And one thing you could really do to help me out is if you're looking at purchasing camera gear from Amazon.com, B&H, or Adorama, then go ahead and use my pre-order links, my smart pre-order links, my pre-order links here, because it really does help this channel grow. A bit of a disclosure, I do get anywhere from 2 to 12% back depending on what's on sale. Thank you so much for tuning in. Have yourself a great week, and we'll see you again soon.